All right, guys. Today we are going to make mead from mostly farm fresh ingredients. So this honey I pulled out of a hive that I lost last year. The bees abandoned it. I don't know what happened, but I pulled out all the comb that was clean and viable. I filtered it 3 times, but it still looks like it's crystallized. So I'm positive it's clean, it's good to eat, but it did crystallize where all my other honey is liquid. So I'm not sure what happened there, but that's part of the reason I'm going to ferment it into mead. These are wild raspberries that my wife and I all picked over the course of a couple weeks. Where we are, they come in almost July 4th to the day, and you can get them for about 2-3 weeks. So I've saved them, put them in the freezer because that helps burst the cell wall. Should make it easier for the yeast to digest. So we got a cheap gallon fermenter with an airlock from Amazon. We got this Lavin K1 V1116 yeast. I specifically got this because it says it's good for red fruit. They have like a cool chart. So we'll follow the instructions there. But what we're going to do, we need about 3 pounds of honey to the gallon of mead. Now, a pound of honey is not 16 ounces, it's a little less. So you're going to tear some empty jars, figure out how much we need, but we'll probably end up using all 3 of these. Actually, this should be 2 pounds. This should be 1 pound. Maybe we'll use a little less. We'll figure that out and I'll show it to you. On the stove, we have a pot of water. It's not boiling, but it's pretty hot. We're going to use that to liquefy some of this honey. Now, people get really nuts. They say, oh, don't heat your honey. Don't heat raw honey. All the honey I have is raw. But again, this is already crystallized and it's going to go through such an intense process with the fermentation. I'm really not worried about killing any probiotics or anything. So we will work on getting that liquefied. We do not need it completely liquefied because we're going to use warm water in our fermentation vessel so we can mix it in a little bit. But it should be a pretty simple process. It's going to take a while, but I figured why not get started. Tear this down. Figure a glass jar weighs 13.2 ounces. Now I'm not going to account for the lid, but if we put on the same size jar, quart jar, we have 2.5 pounds of honey. So just basic math, I'm guessing that this will do the trick. But let's go ahead and we'll tear that down. So we have 2 pounds, 5 ounces of honey right there. Not 2.5 pounds, my bad. Let's tear a pint jar. Go ahead and zero it out. Okay. Take a pint jar of honey. And that's 1 pound, 6 ounces. So then we just need to add those up. Let's do some quick mental math. 1 and 2, 3 pounds, 3 pounds, 11 ounces of honey. So we're actually probably not going to need all that. We'll put most of it in there. But let's get these jars into the warm water. Again, we're going to set it to like a simmer. So a boil usually comes up pretty quick to a boil on this cooktop. But these are sealed. I'll just set it there and let it go. All right, we're going to go ahead and sanitize our equipment. They make like a special rinse for this. But what I'm going to do is use bleach and water, shake it up, then pour that water over this stuff. I'm not too worried about sanitizing it. I think we'll be fine. And we'll just rinse this a couple times. But we got a little bit of bleach in there. Go ahead and pour some water in there, shake it up, dip this stuff in it, shake it. I think we'll be fine. All right, this is kind of a redneck method. We're gonna put our finger over that hole, swish everything around. Airlock should be clean. Anything that's touching the meat is clean at that point. Now we just gotta rinse it 2 or 3 times to make sure there's no leftover residual bleach in there, all right? All right, so our equipment is drip drying. Don't think that's crucial. Our honey is starting to liquefy. We'll turn it a little bit, keep an eye on that. And one of the reasons I'm not too worried about sanitation, they've been making mead for thousands of years. I don't think the Vikings had scales. I don't think they had bleach. Who knows what water source they were using. So I think we're gonna be okay. I am gonna measure berries. The only reason being, I wanna be able to replicate this if it's a really good recipe. And if it's really bad, well, I can say, oh, if I put 16 ounces of berries in, maybe I should do more, maybe I should do less. So what I'm gonna do, I'll let this dry a little bit more. I'm gonna measure out, I think we'll put at least a pint of berries in there. But we're gonna get a little warm water in this vessel, get the berries in there so they start to thaw, and we'll mash that up before we add the honey and the rest of the water. Okay, so that little container, little Tupperware container, is right about a pint of loose berries. I'm gonna take a little more from here and really mash them down. So when I write this recipe down, I'll say a heavy pint of berries. I'm trying to compact them a little bit. And I actually have another one of these vessels. It was a 2-for-1 deal on Amazon, so I'll probably make another one. I have another container of both raspberries and wild blackberries, so I'll mix that. But we'll say for this recipe, we're going to use a heavy pint of berries. I think that'll do nicely. So we'll get these back in the freezer for the next batch. We'll start filling this up with water, making a little bit of a mash, get this thing going. All right, now it might be smart to like put this in a blender or like a Ninja Bullet. I'm just gonna take this masher and do my best just to break it up a little bit. Again, being in the freezer, the cell walls in these berries should have already popped. You probably want this to be a little bit of a slurry, less of whole berries. But I'm gonna spend some time mashing this up. All right, you do not need to measure the temperature of the water. Just get what feels warm to your hand. You also only need a half packet of yeast. I made a second batch of mead after this, used a half packet, didn't get the thermometer. Everything was fine. Go ahead and pitch that, stir it around a little bit, and let it sit. It's amazing how that started to clear up. Looks like good, clean honey again. And again, I'm not real worried about getting it liquefied at this point. I just want to be able to get it out of the jar because I plan on using warm water in here and stirring it all together, which will further break down the crystallization. So let's try the first jar, see if we can dump it in there. Okay, spoon pop that right out. Gonna do it to the second big jar as well. I'm also gonna use the jars to fill up the water the rest of the way so we get the residual honey out of there. It's too good to waste. All right, so let's go ahead and get this jar in there. I changed my mind. You know, most recipes say you need about 3 pounds of honey to a gallon. If I used all that, that would be over 3.5 pounds. So we probably have 3.5 pounds in there right now. I'm gonna let this drip and use it for the next batch. It's gonna be good. All right, so far what do we have? We have a pint of raspberries, wild raspberries. We have, call it probably about 3.5 pounds of honey. We're gonna start to stir this, and I'm gonna add warm water as we go because I can feel the clumps of honey. Let's see, so you can still see it crystallize a little bit. We'll stir this up, then we'll start to add some more warm water. So we add a little water, we stir a little bit, we add a little water, we stir a little bit until we get almost all the way full. Right now, according to the thermometer, we're at about 82 degrees. My goal is to get this up close to 90-ish, 95, because that's what we pitched the yeast at. I'm guessing that's where it's going to perform best, so we want to make sure we give it a good start. We're at 86 degrees, that's pretty good. We have a little bit more warm water here. Top it off. We're gonna pitch that yeast in a second. First, I'm gonna clean the rim of this jar to get any of the honey that's not in the liquid or any of the berry residue off of that. All right, our final temperature there was 88 degrees. We're gonna take our yeast, it's been rehydrated. Go ahead and dump it in. Now I'm just gonna get a little bit of warm water in there, swish it around and get this residual yeast in there. That is gonna top us off. What's left to do now is wait. That yeast has been in there about a minute. We're already starting to see bubbles. So, excited to get this thing going. I don't know how long this video will end up being. If I would have done it without filming it, I would have had all this done and cleaned up probably in about 5 minutes. Super easy process. I can't promise it's gonna be good, but I'll let you know as soon as I do. There's no exact science to it. Actually, I guess there probably is, but I let my mead ferment for about 2 weeks, both of the batches. Just put it in a room temperature room, so call it 70, 73 degrees, out of direct sunlight. You can see it bubbling away. All right, after your fermentation slows down, you're going to want to rack your mead. That means drawing a siphon and pulling it into a new clean vessel and out of the original fermentation vessel. You're also trying to avoid sucking up any of the dead yeast, the chunks of fruit. You're just trying to clean it up here
so to clarify. You can age this ideally in a 60-degree constant temperature room. I did this during the summer, so I aged it in the fridge.
No.
So after you rack your mead, you're going to be left with the tails or the sludge. I figured why not give it a sip.
That's surprisingly good.
So I put in a clean airlock, let this thing sit in the fridge to cold crash and clear up. After another week or two of sitting in the fridge, we're going to siphon it into another clean vessel, try to clarify it a little bit more, then we will go ahead and bottle it up. I don't have a ton, probably ended up with about 3/4 of a gallon, so I'm just going to use little mason jars. Went ahead and sterilized all the jars and all the lids. All right, once those jars are completely cool, go ahead, line them up, fill them up. We will put on clean lids and rings. Not worried about them sealing because the mead will be stored in the fridge.
Zesty. All right, let's compare that to the aged, slightly aged mead. Now keep in mind, 6:44 in the morning, doing it for the YouTube. That's pretty good. It still has a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of fizz. You can taste the alcohol in it, which I appreciate. I would not be mad if I purchased that.